My name is Eric. I'm 27 years old, and last night I sat at a table where everyone clapped, just not for me. Let me rewind a little. I've always been the reliable one, the one who shows up on time, pays his bills, keeps his head down. You know that guy at family dinners who doesn't say much, who asks about your job and listens instead of hijacking the conversation. That's me. And for a long time, I thought playing that role earned me something: respect, love, maybe even a little appreciation. But in my family, it made me invisible. I grew up in a household where chaos was the baseline. My younger brother Jason was always the center of attention, usually because he'd done something wrong: skipping school, getting into fights, stealing, lying, messing up every opportunity handed to him with Olympic-level consistency. And every time he got caught, there was this familiar routine: tears, second chances, and an elaborate new excuse. My parents would just sigh and say things like, "He's struggling," or "He just needs support," while I sat there wondering what I had to do to get half that grace. By the time I was 22, I had moved out, gotten a decent job in IT, and was quietly paying my parents' mortgage after dad got laid off and mom's hours were cut. I didn't advertise it. They asked, I helped. Simple. I paid for their groceries too, sometimes their car repairs, and once, when Jason got arrested for assaulting someone outside a bar, I paid for the lawyer. Not because I believed he was innocent, but because mom called me crying, saying, "You're the only one we can turn to." That was always the line. You're the only one we can turn to. And maybe that's what made last night so surreal. It was supposed to be my graduation dinner. I just finished my master's degree in data science. 2 years of night classes, papers, projects, and working a full-time job on top of that. I hadn't even planned to celebrate, but mom insisted. She said, "We're proud of you. Honey, we want to do something special." That alone should have tipped me off that something was off. My parents don't do special for me. They do necessary. Like a text that says, "Congrats. Love, Mom." Still, I let them plan it. I even booked the restaurant, put down the deposit, paid for the private room. I figured, maybe, just maybe, they were finally going to show me they saw what I'd done. All of it. The job, the degree, the endless financial support. I walked into that restaurant wearing the one suit I owned and a cautious smile. At first, everything seemed normal. The room looked nice. A few cousins I hadn't seen in years were there, smiling politely. The table was set. The food was coming out. I even got a glass of champagne put in front of me, which should have been a sign, because I don't drink, and mom knows that. Then, just as I was about to thank everyone for coming, I heard clapping. Loud, over-the-top clapping. And I looked up, instinctively smiling like a fool, thinking maybe someone was toasting me. Maybe this was the moment they finally acknowledged me. Nope. Mom stood up and wiped a tear. "We're just so proud of Jason for turning his life around," she said, her voice trembling like she was announcing a Nobel Prize. "It's been a long road, but he's finally come out the other side." There was more clapping. Jason stood up next to her, smiling like he'd just invented fire. He had on this too-tight blazer, still creased like it had just come out of the store bag. He gave a little speech, something about growth and gratitude and being a better man. Then Dad reached into his pocket, pulled out a key fob, and tossed it across the table. "This is yours now," he said, his voice thick. "You deserve it more than anyone." I just sat there, holding the bill in my jacket pocket, the one I hadn't given the waiter yet because I thought maybe they'd insist on covering it. After all, it was supposed to be my night. I looked at Jason, then at Mom and Dad. I thought about the $1,800 I'd just wired to their account for this month's mortgage. I thought about the groceries I'd had Instacarted to their place because Mom said she was too tired to shop. I thought about the sleepless nights I spent studying while working overtime. I thought about how nobody asked if I was okay, how nobody ever did. But I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just smiled. Because 3 days ago, I made a phone call. A quiet, calculated, deeply satisfying call to someone they forgot even existed. Her name's Vanessa, my dad's sister, my aunt. She used to be close with my parents until they cut her off over some petty argument 20 years ago. But Vanessa? She never forgot me. She used to send me little Christmas cards when I was a kid. And 3 days ago, I found her number in an old box while cleaning out my apartment. I called. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for 2 hours. Turns out, Vanessa's been doing well. Very well. She's a real estate consultant now. Owns 5 properties. She also remembered something I didn't. The house my parents live in? It's still legally under my name. When I started paying off the mortgage, they asked me to co-sign to help with refinancing, and the bank pushed it through with me as the primary. They never switched it back. Vanessa offered to help me figure out next steps. She even said, if they don't appreciate you, maybe it's time someone knocked some sense into them, literally. I laughed, but she wasn't joking. And last night, while Jason was basking in his parole party spotlight, Vanessa was on a flight to town with a copy of the deed, the account numbers, and a notarized transfer agreement. She lands tonight, and when she does, there's going to be a knock on their door they never expected. I didn't go back to my apartment after the dinner. Instead, I drove to a nearby park, sat in my car, and stared out at the empty baseball field as the lights flickered on. I let the silence fill me up like smoke in my lungs. I didn't cry. That's not really how I process things. But I sat there for almost an hour, just watching shadows move under the trees and thinking about all the times I let things slide. All the birthdays I skipped because I had to work overtime to make ends meet. Not even for me, but for them. All the family dinners where Jason showed up half drunk and still got the first slice of cake. The way Mom used to say, he's fragile, like I wasn't made of anything that could break. Eventually, I drove home, took off the suit I'd barely worn twice in my life, and folded it neatly. I put the receipt for the restaurant in the drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted to remind myself later that I paid $873.42 for my own erasure. Vanessa's plane landed at 11:40 p.m. I was already at the terminal when she stepped out. She hadn't changed much since I last saw her when I was 12. Same sharp eyes, same calm energy that made people either respect her or hate her. She wore a navy blue trench coat and carried a black leather folder in one hand. "Eric," she said, with a small smile. "You look just like your dad, minus the permanent scowl." I laughed a little. She gave me a quick hug. Not long, not overly sentimental. Just real. We didn't go to a hotel. She came to my place. I made coffee, even though it was close to midnight, and we sat at my kitchen table under the soft yellow glow of a single overhead bulb while she opened the folder. Inside were papers. A copy of the deed, with my name printed clearly at the top. Statements showing the mortgage history. Transfer rights. Terms of termination. And then, something extra. "You're on all the utilities, too," Vanessa said, tapping one page. "Gas, electric, internet. You've been paying them out of your own accounts." Which means, she turned another page, then slid it over to me. "You can legally shut them off at will. No notice needed. Since you're the financial holder, not just a contributor." I stared at the document. My name was all over it. Electricity, gas, water, internet. I just never realized the power I had. Vanessa leaned back. "I know you're not the vindictive type," she said. "But I also know you're tired. And people like your parents, like Jason, they don't learn from kindness. They exploit it. You've been feeding a system that only functions if you stay quiet." That hit me harder than I expected. Feeding a system. Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. They'd trained me to be the silent provider. The bank account with feet. The obedient one who never needed a thank you because we're family was supposed to be enough. I nodded. Vanessa didn't push further. She just sipped her coffee and waited. The next morning, we drove together to the county office. She'd already made an appointment. I signed the necessary forms to begin the formal process of reclaiming the house. Legally, completely, and without discussion. I could have started with an eviction notice right there. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I had something else in mind. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to make sure they understood what they lost. We drove to the neighborhood, the same quiet cul-de-sac I grew up in, with the faded basketball hoop on the driveway and the cracked stepping stones Mom always said she'd fix. I parked across the street. Jason's new car, or rather, the one they just handed him, was sitting in the driveway, still shining like a promise someone else paid for. Vanessa stayed in the car while I walked up to the front porch. I didn't knock. I used my key. Inside, everything looked the same. The beige couch with the sagging cushions, the glass bowl full of dusty fake fruit, the family photos on the wall where Jason's face was always front and center and mine was always off to the side, like I'd photobombed my own life. I walked straight to the kitchen and unplugged the Wi-Fi router. Then I shut off the breakers, one by one, until the house went dark and silent. Then I walked out, got back in the car, and handed Vanessa the key. "That was step one," I said. She nodded. "Now we wait." We waited 2 hours. Around 4:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. "Hey, sweetie, do you know if something's wrong with the power? Everything's out, and the bill says it was paid." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another text. "Jason can't get online for his court-mandated therapy session. This isn't funny. Please respond." Then from Dad. "Where are you? Did you do something?" I turned off my phone and looked out the window. Across the street, the front door of the house opened. Jason stepped out, confused, holding his phone in the air, then stormed back inside. The house was completely dark now, except for the sliver of daylight spilling in through the windows. And that's when Vanessa reached into her folder, pulled out a small sealed envelope, and said, "Ready for step 2?" I took it. Inside was a letter, and an official notice that would change everything. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its weight, it was just a letter and a few documents, but because of what it meant. I held it in my lap for a second before opening it, letting the tension settle between my fingers. Vanessa sat beside me in the passenger seat, tapping her nails lightly against her coffee cup, saying nothing. She didn't need to. This part had to be mine. Inside the envelope were 3 things: a formal notice of revocation of occupancy agreement, a list of all expenses I had paid on the house in the past 3 years, complete with bank statements and annotated receipts, and, most importantly, a handwritten letter I had drafted but never had the nerve to send until now. I walked back across the street alone. No knocking this time either. I used the key one last time. Jason was sitting on the couch, squinting at his phone like the screen might magically start working again. My parents were in the kitchen, their voices low but urgent. The fridge door was open, light inside still glowing. The only thing in the house that hadn't shut down. Mom looked up and her face shifted from confusion to relief, like she thought I was there to fix everything, the way I always did. "Eric, thank God," she said. "Something's wrong with the electricity, the internet's down, and Jason can't." I walked straight past her and placed the envelope on the counter. "What's this?" Dad asked, his arms crossed. I met his eyes. "Read it." Mom opened the letter first. I could see her eyes scanning the lines, her lips moving silently as she read. Then her expression started to change, a slow unraveling of the usual smug confidence into something tight, something vaguely panicked. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's legal," I said, "and binding." Jason stood up from the couch. "What are you talking about, man?" I turned to him. "You don't live here anymore. None of you do. Effective immediately, your right to reside in this house has been revoked. It's mine now. Legally. Financially. Everything. Are you kicking us out?" Mom asked, incredulous. "No," I said. "I'm correcting a mistake." Dad snatched the expense sheet from the envelope, and his face went red as he scanned it. "You kept track of everything?" "Of course I did," I said. "You told me I was family, not a landlord. But you treated me like an ATM. So now I'm just putting it all in writing. And in 3 days, a formal notice of eviction will be served. You'll have 30 days to leave." Jason started pacing. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't do this." I looked at him and smiled. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have. But 3 days ago, I called someone who reminded me I didn't have to keep playing the family scapegoat just to earn a seat at the table. Mom walked around the counter and tried to put a hand on my arm. "Sweetie, don't do this. We're your parents." "You are," I said quietly. "But you're also the people who clapped harder for a guy who just got out of jail than for the one who paid off your mortgage." Jason's face twisted. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I know I am. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm done financing your mistakes." Dad stepped in now, his voice rising. "You're breaking this family apart." "No," I said, walking toward the door. "You broke it years ago. I'm just officially acknowledging it." I turned back to them once more before leaving. "You have until the end of the month. If you want to negotiate terms, talk to Vanessa. She's my legal representative now. And if you change the locks or try to pull anything stupid, just know, everything's in writing, and I have it all backed up in 3 places." I walked out, closed the door behind me, and this time, I didn't take the key with me. I left it in the mailbox, a symbolic gesture more than anything. I wouldn't need it anymore. Vanessa was waiting in the car, sunglasses on, engine running. "Let me guess," she said, smiling faintly. "They took it well." I didn't answer, just buckled my seatbelt and looked out the window. Across the street, the blinds were shaking slightly, like someone was peeking out but didn't want to be seen. "They're going to panic," I said finally. Vanessa nodded. "Good." We drove off in silence. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, clear. And then my phone buzzed again. Not from Mom. Not from Dad. Not from Jason. It was a number I didn't recognize, a voicemail. I put it on speaker. A shaky voice came through. Eric, it's me, your cousin Allison. I heard what happened. And I just wanted to say, I saw the graduation post online. I'm proud of you. Always have been. There was a pause. Also, if you need help with anything, let me know. I'm not like them. I looked over at Vanessa. She smiled. Looks like someone just picked a side. But she had no idea what was coming next. Because the next knock on my parents' door wasn't going to come from me or Vanessa. It was going to come from someone none of us had heard from in years. And when she showed up, the entire game would change. 2 days passed. I kept my phone on silent, but I didn't turn it off. I wanted to see the fallout, not to gloat, but because part of me needed to know they were finally feeling what I'd swallowed in silence for years. Uncertainty, fear, a world that didn't just bend for them. The texts poured in like clockwork. Eric, this isn't you. We can talk about this. Jason's job depends on this address. If he loses it, it's on you. Are you really evicting your own family? I didn't respond to any of them. Vanessa handled the legal prep while I worked my usual hours from home, drank my coffee, and took long walks through the city, breathing in freedom I hadn't realized I'd been missing. That gnawing sense of obligation was gone. I no longer woke up to dread disguised as duty. But the real shift started on the third night. Vanessa and I had just finished dinner at a small Ethiopian place she liked downtown when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. It's her, she said. I blinked. You mean? She nodded. Yep. She just landed. The next morning, we drove out to the house again. Not to go inside. I wouldn't do that. Not yet. We parked down the block in Vanessa's car, watched the windows from a distance. The place looked hollow. No lights. No movement. The car Jason got as a gift sat slightly crooked in the driveway, one tire already low. The lawn hadn't been cut, and a pile of newspapers sat untouched near the porch. Then, just past 9 a.m., a silver SUV pulled up and parked directly in front of the house. The door opened. A woman stepped out, tall, dark gray suit, polished flats, her hair tied back in a tight braid. She looked like someone who wasn't here to make friends or forgive anything. Vanessa exhaled slowly. God, she hasn't changed. I watched silently as the woman walked up the porch and knocked once. Not aggressively, just a firm, decisive knock. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance around. She knew they were home. That knock wasn't a question. It was an announcement. Mom answered. From the way her posture immediately shrunk, I knew she recognized her. Is that? I asked, still not quite believing it. Vanessa smiled tightly. That's Judge Clarissa Brooks. Retired, but still very, very sharp. I turned to her. Wait, Judge Brooks. As in, Aunt Clarissa. Vanessa nodded. She's my cousin. Your dad's second cousin, technically. They had a falling out years ago when she told him flat out that enabling Jason would ruin the family. He called her bitter and jealous. She never spoke to him again. She's a judge, I said, stunned. She was. Civil litigation. Property and contract disputes. She moved to Oregon a while back, but when I called her, Vanessa shrugged. Let's just say she's been waiting for a reason to get involved. We watched from the car as Mom stood frozen at the door. Judge Brooks said something, short, sharp, and handed her a folder. Then she stepped inside. Vanessa handed me a tablet. Security cameras, she said, grinning. Motion triggered. I installed them last week while you were at work. I stared at her. You did what? She tapped the screen. Check the kitchen feed. I tapped into the live stream. The camera wasn't hidden. It was just placed in the corner of the kitchen, angled perfectly to show the counter and most of the living room. It was technically still my property, so everything was legal. On screen, Judge Brooks stood in the middle of the room, holding court in the most literal sense. She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just spoke like a person used to having the final word. So unless you have documented evidence that Eric willingly gifted you the title, the deed stands. And if you attempt to challenge it, you'll not only lose, you'll be responsible for legal fees, damages, and back interest. Mom sat in a dining chair, visibly shrinking. Jason paced behind her, throwing up his hands. This is insane. That house is ours. I grew up here. You grew up in it, Brooks corrected. You didn't buy it. You didn't maintain it. You didn't own it. Dad walked in now, his voice booming. You don't get to march in here and tear apart our family. Judge Brooks turned to him slowly. You tore your family apart the moment you chose to reward failure over loyalty. Now you're reaping what you sowed. I almost laughed. It was surgical. Mom spoke up again, her voice fragile. What are we supposed to do? Just pack up and leave. Judge Brooks opened the folder again and pulled out a final sheet. You have two options. Vacate willingly within 30 days and sign the property handover agreement. Or fight it, lose in court, and walk out with nothing but a debt to your own son. Either way, this house is no longer yours. Jason slammed his palm on the table. You can't do this. She turned to him. I already did. The camera feed paused. Vanessa had turned off the tablet. That's enough for now, she said softly. I looked at her. You didn't tell me she was a judge. Vanessa shrugged again. I wanted it to be a surprise. Besides, revenge is better when it comes from someone wearing pearls and a three-piece suit. Outside, the front door of the house opened again. Judge Brooks stepped out, calm as ever, folder in hand. She didn't look back. And as she passed Jason's car, she paused, pulled out a small envelope from her coat, and slipped it under his windshield wiper. Vanessa laughed. What's that? I asked. Probably the lien notice, she said. Jason's car? Still under your parents' name. And guess who defaulted on their credit union line of credit last month? I stared. Oh, you thought the gift car was free? She added, amused. No. They financed it, using the house's value as collateral. And now that the house wasn't theirs, that car was as good as gone. We sat in silence, the kind that says everything. I didn't feel joy exactly, not even triumph. What I felt was release. A long, quiet exhale that had been building for a decade. My whole life, I'd waited for someone to stand up for me. Turns out, it was always going to be me, with the right people at my side. But it wasn't over yet. Because that night, Jason showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door, screaming, begging, threatening, and saying the one thing I never thought I'd hear him say. He pounded like the door owed him something, like the wood and hinges were personally responsible for his life falling apart. It was close to midnight, and I had just finished cleaning up after dinner when I heard the first slam, not a knock, a slam, followed by muffled yelling that grew louder as I approached the door. Eric, open up. I know you're in there. Vanessa was already beside me, calm as always. She motioned for me to wait before opening it. We both listened. Jason's voice carried through the door like thunder on a tin roof. I just want to talk. Okay, just talk. We're brothers, man. Family. You can't seriously be doing this. You can't. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I just waited until he paused, breathing hard, as if the weight of his own choices had finally settled into his chest. Then I opened the door. He looked awful, not like someone who had hit rock bottom, more like someone who realized there was a bottom and he'd been sprinting toward it. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled and stained, and his posture, this was new, was slumped, like something inside him had snapped or maybe finally sobered up. I didn't say anything. Jason blinked hard. They're losing it, man. Mom's been crying nonstop. Dad won't come out of the garage. They think you're actually going to go through with this. I already have, I said. He ran a hand through his greasy hair. Look, I know I messed up. I know I haven't been great, or fair, or even decent. But you don't have to burn everything down just to prove a point. Vanessa stood behind me, arms crossed. He's not burning it down, Jason. He's finally rebuilding it, without the rot. Jason looked past me at her, then back at me. Seriously? You got her coaching you now? This is your family, Eric, not hers. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Let's talk, I said. He backed up a bit, like he wasn't sure whether I was about to punch him or help him up. You remember when we were 16? I began. And you got caught shoplifting those sunglasses from the mall? Jason blinked. What does that have to do with? I took the blame, I said flatly. Told Dad they were mine. Got grounded for 2 months. You didn't say a word. He went silent. You remember when you crashed Dad's old Corolla during that party? I lied to the insurance guy. Said it was me. They covered it. You didn't say a word. He shifted on his feet. And when you got arrested, the lawyer you used? That was me. The retainer. The late-night paperwork. All of it. Jason was staring at the floor now. You never said thank you. Not once. You never even asked how I was doing. You just assumed I'd always be there. Because I was the good son. The one who didn't cause problems. The one who didn't need anything. He looked up, his voice quieter now. I didn't think you cared about that stuff. I didn't, I said, until I realized it was the only thing anyone ever expected of me. He looked like he wanted to argue, to fight, but there was nothing left to defend. Jason, I said, softer now, I don't hate you. I don't even want revenge. But I'm done carrying the weight of people who keep handing me bricks. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. So what now? He finally asked. You leave, I said. You find your own way. Get a job. Start over. Prove them right, that you've turned your life around. But you do it without my money, without my couch, and without my silence. He stared at me, then let out a slow breath. All right, he said. I get it. He turned and walked down the hallway, slower than he'd arrived. No screaming. No fists against the wall. Just heavy, reluctant footsteps. I watched from the door as he disappeared into the night. Vanessa came up beside me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, I think I actually am. The eviction went through. 30 days later, the house was empty. Clean. Quiet. I sold it within the month and used the profit to put a down payment on a duplex. I moved into one half and rented the other to a quiet couple with a baby and a bulldog named Waffles. Mom and Dad tried to reach out, once. A voicemail from Mom that started with, I know things got heated, and ended with, you'll always be our son. I deleted it without listening to the middle. Jason sent a single message a few months later. Got a job. Not much, but it's mine. Hope you're well. I didn't reply, but I didn't block him either. That was the first time I realized what peace really felt like. Not a big dramatic ending. Just silence. Boundaries. A quiet apartment where no one expected anything from me I wasn't willing to give. And every now and then, when I walk past the mirror in the hallway, I nod to myself. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not the background character in someone else's story. I'm the author.